Imagine a night like this. No car horns, no city lights, only cold wind crawling along shattered stone walls. You are standing alone amid the ruins of a forgotten castle, and suddenly you feel someone is watching you. Not with eyes, not with a body, but with something thick and heavy and boiling with hatred, drifting around you like it has weight. If a soul, after death, doesn't dissolve into light, doesn't go to any heaven or hell, but remains as pure resentment, wandering like a thinking fog, then what does it become? A wraith, or maybe just humanity's warning about what happens when we live and die, clinging only to hatred. Long before electricity, long before horror soundtracks, people told each other stories about ghosts. But among the many shapes of the dead, there is one kind of spirit that is especially frightening. It doesn't appear clearly like someone who has died and come back. It has no face to recognize, no name to call. It is only a smudged shadow, thin as smoke, but heavy as a stone on the chest of the living. People call it by many names, but in the world of fantasy, we often call it a wraith, a soul that has lost everything except its hatred. If a ghost is still someone who once was human, then a wraith is what a soul becomes after its humanity has been eaten away, leaving only a wound that refuses to heal. Let's go back to a nameless kingdom, where fog always clings to the mountainside like cold hands. On the peak of a cliff stands a gray stone fortress, thick walls, torn flags. There once lived a warlord whom people only dared to address by his title, never by his real name. The Lord of the Winter Night. He won by blood, built his dominion on the screams of the defeated. Every spear on the walls was a life taken. Every layer of stone in the great hall was soaked with sweat and despair. But like every story of power, his end did not come from enemies outside, but from those who had once knelt at his feet. One night, while the wind howled outside the walls, his closest commanders turned on him. During a victory feast, the wine in his goblet was quietly replaced with poison. By the time the Lord realized, it was too late. He collapsed on the cold stone floor, staring up at the faces of the men who had sworn to die for him, now as hard as statues. They did not only want him dead, they wanted him forgotten, erased from every record, from every song, as if he had never existed. And in that last moment, as his breath dissolved into the air, he understood one thing. For someone who lived on fear and glory, being forgotten was more terrifying than death itself. They say his soul left his body, but no light opened before him, no doorway appeared to welcome him. Instead came the sensation of falling, not into a pit, but into his own heart, a chasm filled with rage, humiliation, and fury. In that place, any good memory, if it had ever existed, was devoured. Only betrayal remained, mocking laughter, broken oaths, the sound of his name being scraped off stone. His soul curled inward and shattered into mist, mixing with the darkness of the castle. And so a wraith was born. No shape, no voice, only a will that refused to release its hatred, drifting around the ruined walls of its former kingdom. From that day on, the fortress on the cliff was never truly silent. Travelers say that when the fog grows thick, you can see a patch of darkness sliding along the walls, deeper than the shadow around it. Pack horses on the road below suddenly panic, neighing and rearing with no reason anyone can see. Travelers sleeping in nearby huts wake in the middle of the night, hearts pounding, as if invisible hands had been gripping their throats. No one hears a voice, but everyone feels the same thing. Hatred spreading like poison in the air, seeping into every heartbeat and breath. As the years passed and wars ended, his name disappeared from records, but the fortress earned a new one, the Castle of Shadows. Children were warned that if they misbehaved, the shadow on the mountain would come for them. The old swore they had seen a dark shape gliding past their windows on stormy nights. But every description was the same. It had no face, no eyes. It was a torn, fluttering cloak shape drifting in the air, but it moved against the wind. A thing no longer bound by natural law, bound instead by a different law, the law of hatred that refuses to fade. There is a tale that has been passed down through many generations about a young shepherd boy who wandered up the slope on a night of choking fog. He was cold, hungry, and afraid. In a heartbeat, he felt someone behind him. Not footsteps, not breathing, just the sense that even the air was watching him. He turned and saw nothing clear, only a patch of darkness, denser than the surrounding mist, standing a few steps away. His stomach clenched, his heart hammered so hard it felt like it would break his ribs. Yet inside that fear, he also felt something else, a crushing loneliness that had stretched on for centuries. A soul that no longer remembered who it was, only that it had been betrayed, that it had hated, that it had wanted revenge. The shepherd's story usually ends ambiguously. In some versions, he dies of fright, and they find him the next morning with his eyes open wide. In others, he survives, but returns to the village unable to speak or smile again. However it ends, what matters is the feeling it leaves behind. A wraith is not like ordinary ghosts. It does not come to talk or explain or state its demands. It does not ask for justice, does not ask for its name to be carved on a stone. It is simply a wound turned into a being, wandering forever, trying to spread its feeling into anyone who passes by. Look closely, and you'll see that wraiths differ from the more familiar ghosts we hear about. The ghost of a family member often still carries habits, gestures, and appearances from life, mixing fear with love or sadness. Restless spirits in folklore tend to have clear stories. They were wronged, hurt, buried without rites. If they are vindicated, properly mourned or buried, they can move on. But a wraith, in many legends, lies beyond that logic. It is a soul whose story has been chopped to pieces, leaving only the last chapter of blood and fire. It doesn't care to be heard, because it doesn't want to tell the whole truth. It wants only one thing: for every living thing to feel what it feels: endless, burning resentment. Its form is often vague, but traditions agree on one element. It is always missing, torn, hollow, where a face should be. Some cultures imagine it as an empty cloak drifting through the air. Where a head should be is only a black, endless hollow, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. What does that say? It says that the wraith is no longer a person, but pure emotion. There is no I know you, no he. There is only I hate, I resent, I want the world to freeze over like I did. A soul without a face means a soul without identity, existing only as a wound, and that wound alone is enough to keep it in this world. If you look more broadly, you'll see the image of the wraith in many mythologies, even when they don't use that exact word. In the icy north, there are stories of those who drowned under the ice, becoming pale spirits that pull others down. In the east, there are Onru vengeful spirits full of hate, returning to torment the living. Elsewhere, there are souls wandering battlefields, unaware that the war has ended, still hunting for enemies to kill. They all share the same pattern. Death doesn't end the story. It stretches it out in a warped, haunting way. From this common root, the archetype of the wraith is born in our collective imagination. So why do humans need the image of the wraith? Why don't we simply think, death is the end, or death is a step into another place? Because in real life, there are pains, massacres, betrayals so extreme that we feel they cannot simply disappear with the dead. When a village is burned, when a people are slaughtered, when someone's honor is destroyed and thrown into oblivion, the living feel that something has been left behind. We wrap that feeling that we cannot let this just vanish as if it never happened, in the shape of a soul drifting forever. The Wraith, in that sense, is our imagination trying to give a body to something formless, memories that refuse to be buried. Back on the cliffside, they say many generations of priests, shamans, and holy men have been called to cleanse the fortress. They brought fire, prayers, sacred symbols. But every time, the flames died halfway. The prayers were swallowed by the wind, and people left feeling heavier than before. Because to drive out a wraith, you must first name it, must tell its story all the way to the end. Yet after so many generations, no one remembers precisely who the warlord was, what he did, and what he suffered. All that remain are scattered whispers of violence and betrayal. And that vagueness makes the wraith stronger. It is no longer trapped in a specific story. It becomes a symbol of every fear and wound people are afraid to face. In another perspective, the wraith is not only something out there, on mountains, in ruins, in deserted places. It is also something we carry within. Communities that have lived through war, genocide, or generations of violence often live with their own wraith, a collective memory that no one talks about, a wound passed down from grandparents to children through silence and unspoken fear. They still eat, sleep, laugh, but when a crisis comes, all the old feelings awaken, as if a wraith steps out of the dark and touches each person it remembers from centuries past. Applied to the modern world, wraiths don't only haunt old castles. They drift along social media timelines and inside endless online arguments. Whenever a community keeps repeating an old wound with a furious voice, refusing any new meaning, refusing healing in that moment, the wraith is speaking through us. Raging comments, curses repeated daily nurture something invisible but real. The sense that we were betrayed and the world must pay forever. You can't see it, but you feel the shared space grow colder, heavier. On a personal level, a wraith is also a metaphor for what happens when a person allows hatred to become their core. When someone is betrayed or deeply hurt, they have two paths. Accept that pain as part of their story and continue forward, or turn their entire life into a loop of revenge and bitterness. If they choose the second path long enough, they begin to lose other parts of themselves. Their hobbies, their dreams, their tenderness, their ability to trust, their ability to feel joy. Eventually, they become hollow, orbiting only one point: resentment. That is the state of a wraith. Still existing, still with will, but no longer with a life. In many stories, people ask, can a wraith ever be freed? Is there any ending other than being burned, exorcised, or magically destroyed? Some legends answer, yes. There are tales of someone brave enough to go to where the wraith dwells, not to fight, but to speak, to retell the whole story from beginning to end, from good moments to atrocities, from glory to shame. Only then does the wraith begin to remember who it once was, and in that instant, it may choose to let go. But even when such endings exist, they always come at a high price. The one who faces the wraith rarely returns unchanged. They carry the mark of the pain they have touched, but they also carry back a piece of the truth. Imagine another night, many years later, on the rocky ledge where the fortress stands. An old traveler, not a mage, not a hero, sets up a small tent and lights a fire. He has heard the stories of the wraith on the mountain, but brings no talisman, only a worn notebook. When the darkness thickens around the fire, he feels the air shift, the wind go quiet. A denser patch of night glides into the edge of the firelight. Instead of drawing a sword or retreating, he begins to tell a story. Not to himself, but to that darkness. About a child growing up in fear, surviving by learning to be violent first, then using the fear of others as a tool. About a man who built a kingdom on blood, but never knew what to do with his own loneliness. About a night of betrayal and the feeling of being erased from history. The story does not excuse his crimes, but it does not reduce him to only a monster. They say that night, the darkness around the traveler trembled like ripples on a lake. The fire did not die, but its light changed, as if shining through a thick layer of mist. At the edge of the black void, where once there was only emptiness, a human face flickered for a heartbeat. Not demon, not saint, just an old, exhausted man. Then the image vanished. At dawn, the traveler left the mountain. People later said the fortress was still ruined, the fog still thick, but the suffocating feeling was slightly lighter. Maybe the wraith did not disappear. Maybe it only withdrew further into the shadows. But from that point on, the tale was told with a new detail, that even a soul of hatred had once been human, and hesitated for a moment before choosing the path of endless drifting. As a symbol, the wraith reminds us that hatred does not appear from nowhere, but once fed, it can outlive the body, outlast a lifetime. It can become a tradition, an identity, a part of history repeated over and over without ever healing. A wraith is what a story becomes when it is frozen at its worst chapter, replayed so many times that all other chapters vanish. And that is also what is happening to many communities and individuals. When we define ourselves only by what others did to us, not by what we can create afterward. At the same time, the wraith raises a hard question. If its hatred is real, if its suffering has never been acknowledged, is simply banishing or destroying it truly a solution? In the real world, when we face collective memories of violence and dark chapters of history, we face the same choice. Be haunted forever, pretend nothing happened, or dare to look directly at them. Tell the story fully, accept responsibility, give pain a legitimate place, and then move forward. In a way, every time humanity succeeds in doing that, we silently free a wraith wandering in our shared memory. And then the wraith's tale returns to each listener late at night, when the screen is off and the room is dim. You might ask yourself, if one day, everything that makes you, your face, your name, your job, your possessions were stripped away, and only one thing remained that you refused to release, what would that be? If you died in a moment of obsession, anger, and bitterness, would the rest of you drift as a wraith not in the physical world, but in the memories of those your life has touched? Wraith, when a soul is nothing but a floating storm of hatred, is not just a monster in fantasy, not just a hovering shape in games or movies. It is a twisted but honest mirror, reflecting the parts of us, of our communities, of our history that we have not yet had the courage to face. Every time we choose to nurture hatred instead of understanding, to replay the past instead of writing the future, we add a little more cold mist to the invisible wraiths circling around us. And perhaps the most chilling thing this figure whispers to us is not a scream in the night, but a question as soft as a breeze that no one wants to answer. If one day, the only thing that remains of you in this world is not your smile, not your kindness, but an unresolved, lingering hatred, where will your soul go? Will it dissolve into light or quietly turn into a wraith, drifting around the places your feet once walked, waiting for someone brave enough to tell your story all the way to the last page?